Chapter 5, Section 2, we're going to talk about the warring city-states within Greece. So, during this time, we just finished talking about the Dorian people, the Greek civilization that really experienced a decline. But things changed all throughout life in Greece. The Dorians and Mycenaeans alike began to identify less with the culture of their ancestors and more with the local area where they lived. And the method of governing in those areas changes as well. So you'll start to see some very different changes within this. So kind of what we're talking about here, the growth of the city-states in Greece leads to really the development of several political systems. One of those, which includes democracy, which is really why we're talking about the Greeks here in the first place, is this is the first place that we start to see democracy set up. So by 750 BCE, the city-state, or what's known as the polis, okay, or the city surrounding that area, is going to really be the fundamental political unit within Greece. That is the place in which people kind of resign to and understand, and they are a part of that group. So that becomes the polis, the formal government. And usually it's anywhere between 50 to 500 square miles of the surrounding area. The population of that city-state, however, is usually below 10,000 people, and citizens usually gather in a place called a marketplace called an acropolis. Usually that place is going to be located on top of a hill as a part of this, and it becomes kind of the basis for the ideas within this. So the Greek political structures, and I have a slide on this later on in this, but the Greek political structures are very different from each one. If you recall, we talked about in section 1 the terrain that was so different within Greece that caused these groups to have different areas. So the different types of government you'll see are monarchy, which would be a rule by king, an aristocracy, which is a rule by nobility, or an oligarchy, which is a rule by a small group of rather powerful merchants and artisans. When we look at these different groups, we see tyrants as well that come in. Usually those groups are going to be powerful individuals, probably a noble or a wealthy citizen that will seize control of the government, and they really do so because they appeal to the common people for support. The common people understand that these groups of people are going to be these tyrants or have their best interests behind them. Unlike what we know to be tyrants today, where they're usually we usually associate them with being harsh and cruel. This group of tyrants usually work for the interests of the ordinary people, so they are really loved, and they will seize control and rule in the interests of those ordinary people, generally providing jobs and housing for all of their supporters. So tyrants in the Greek form is usually, especially back then, is usually a good thing. So Athens is a representative government. They take root in a lot of the city-states, or representative government, excuse me, takes root in city-states, mainly one of those being Athens. The Athenians do avoid major political upheavals by making some very timely reforms. And one of those reforms is a move toward democracy. Democracy itself is a government controlled by the citizens, either directly or through representatives. And we'll have more conversations about this later on. But those are kind of the ways that it's gone about. The first step towards democracy comes in 621 BC, when Draco develops what's called a legal code. That legal code is based on the idea that the Athenians, whether they were rich or poor, were equal under the law. That's hugely important. something that we're still striving for even today in our own democracy. People are equal under the law, equality of citizens. And when we look at it, even back then, I'm sure there were distinctions that didn't allow for those things. And so those are absolute parts of this that we have to understand and look at. But Draco's the first one to pass that legal code. Next, we have Solon, who comes to power in 594 BC. He states that no citizen should own another citizen, and he outlaws the practice of debt slavery. Debt slavery itself is this idea that slavery based off of owing money was something that was not allowed. He also organizes all Athenian citizens into 4 social classes that were according to wealth. This we still see, right? We have our poor, our lower class, our middle, and our upper class. What we still see, and sometimes you break it down even differently than that. But we have those same classes, the social classes. However, it's not ruled based off of who can speak to one another or talk to one another. But there are different classes that exist within this. Only members of the top 3 classes could actually hold a political office in democracy, in Solon's democracy as well. Solon introduces a legal concept that any citizen could bring suit or charges against wrongdoers as well. Next, you have Cleisthenes. Around 500 BC, Cleisthenes comes in and introduces further reforms. He's going to break up the power of the nobility. He'll organize citizens into 10 groups based on where they live rather than their wealth. So this is a living situation as opposed to wealth. Now, there are a lot of people who would argue even nowadays that where you live is still based on wealth. And that's true. But that is definitely something that Cleisthenes tried to change. He's also going to go out and increase the power of the assembly, allowing all citizens to submit laws for debate and passage as well. He then creates something called the Council of 500. That body would actually go out and propose laws and counsel the assembly. So council members were chosen by lot or really at random in those realms. So the reforms that Cleisthenes does give allows the Athenian citizens to participate in a limited democracy. But citizenship itself is actually restricted to a small number of the Athenians. So we see that just because you're an Athenian, if you aren't a citizen, you aren't allowed to be a part of the democracy that was being built. Only free adult males were considered citizens. Women, slaves, and foreigners are all going to be excluded from the citizenship itself. They have very few rights. When we look at education, really only the sons of wealthy families will receive some type of formal education. It's going to begin schooling around the age of 7, and it would largely prepare boys to be good citizens. That was really what the thought was. They're going to study things like reading, grammar, poetry, history, mathematics, and music, and those are the big portions of things that they will study. Because citizens were expected to debate issues in the assembly, the boys also received training in logic and public speaking as well. So it's very important for them too to train the body. So you start to see these boys going out in athletic activities, military school to help them prepare for other important duties of citizenship, which was defending Athens. And this is where we start to see their belief in athleticism and those aspects. And this is where kind of the ideas behind the Olympic Games begin. Not necessarily the same way we see them today, but there are those types of things that exist. Athenian girls are not going to attend schools. They're going to be educated at home by their mothers and other female members of the household. They'll learn how to give birth, weave cloth, prepare meals, managing the household itself. Really domestic skills, as we would refer to it today, is what their job was. And their job was to really stay home and take care of the things here. Most women have very little to do with Athenian life outside the boundary of family and home. And we'll have a conversation about this. I'll have a question for you guys after this. Next, Sparta. And well, before we get to Sparta, let's look at the different types of forms of government. So a monarchy, state ruled by a king, rules usually hereditary, meaning it's passed down in the family. Some rulers will declaim a divine right, and it's practiced in Mycenae by 2000 BC. Next, an aristocracy, state ruled by nobility. Rule is hereditary and based on family ties, social rank, so on and so forth. Oligarchy, usually ruled by a small group of citizens, wealth or ability. They usually control the military as well. That's practiced in Sparta by 500 BC. And then direct democracy would be a state ruled by the citizens itself. And with that, you also see majority rule deciding the vote as well. Sparta itself, it's very unique in the fact that they are isolated from so much of Greece. They are located right in the middle of an island. And so they're isolated in there, and they build a military state through this oligarchy ideal. They have a council of elders made up of 30 older citizens. They'll propose laws which the assembly would vote on. They have 5 elected officials carrying out those laws and passed by the assembly. They'll control education as well. And so all those things are a part of it. The social order consists of several different groups. The first are citizens descended from the original inhabitants of the region. That would be ruling families who own land. The second group are non-citizens, but they're free. They work in things like commerce and industry. And the helots are at the bottom of the Spartan society. They are really slaves in a lot of ways. So that's kind of their ideal in their government and society. As far as domination of the Messenians, around 725, Sparta conquered their neighboring region of Messenia and took over the lands. The Messenians become that group of helots or peasants forced to farm the land there. And each year, the Spartans demanded half of the helots' crops. So about 650 BC, the Messenians, resentful of Spartans' harsh rule, they revolt. And the Spartans, who were outnumbered 8-1, put down the revolt. And shocked at their kind of vulnerability there, they worked to build a stronger state, and with that, a stronger military as well. The daily life of a Spartan. They represent duty, okay? They love the fact that they have military supremacy. They're most powerful army in Greece, not navy, but army. So their values are duty, strength, individuality, and discipline over freedom. That's what they value. Males are going to move into the barracks around age 7, and they'll train until 30 and serve within that army until they're 60 years old. Even some of the girls receive military training as well, and they usually live hardy lives too. They do not value arts and literature whatsoever. And men at this point in time, and the women understand this as well, Spartan women would actually tell their husbands when going to war, come back with your shield or on it, meaning they would be dead, being dragged back on their shields. So the Spartan life is really this military state that exists. So the Persian Wars, with a new kind of army that takes place. So I have a video that's linked in here. I'm not sure if you guys are going to be able to watch it, but if you're not, you can look it up if you type in the Battle of Thermopylae, which is going to be something that we talk about here. So a cheaper iron is going to replace bronze, making arms and armor much cheaper. And that will lead to a new kind of army. And it includes soldiers really from all classes, because if you didn't have the money to buy your own weapons, you couldn't participate in the armies itself. It also, with this, it blends all of those different groups, and they have a formation that they call a phalanx. It is really feared by all. The formation of the soldiers with spears and shields coming together in this phalanx, and I want you guys to look that up because it's actually a rather impressive thing. So it really shifts the way that things happen. And the phalanx becomes the most powerful fighting force within the ancient world there. The Battle of Marathon happens with the Persian Wars between Greece and the Persian Empire. The Greeks had long been settled there, but around 546 BC, the Persians conquered the area. And when the Greeks, the Ionian Greeks that were on the coast of Anatolia, they revolt, Athens sends ships to their aid, and the Persian king Darius, he defeats the rebels and vows to destroy all of Athens in revenge. In 490 BC, a Persian fleet carries about 25,000 men across what's known as the Aegean Sea, and they land northeast of Athens at a place called Marathon. 10,000 Athenians, neatly arranged in their phalanxes, are waiting for them. And they're vastly outnumbered, but the Greek soldiers charge, and the Persians, who wear a rather light kind of armor, and they really lack the training that was necessary, are defeated by the Greeks and the disciplined phalanxes. The Persians flee the battlefield, right? And they lose more than 6,000 men, in contrast to the Athenian numbers, which is really only 200. And from this, Phidippides is going to bring the news. He is a runner who, according to tradition, he's an army leader and he races back to Athens, Phidippides does. He brought news of the Persian defeat, so the Athenians would not give up the city without a fight. He dashes 26 miles from Marathon to Athens. If that sounds familiar, it should, because 26.2 miles is a marathon. So that's where we get the term marathon, the running from Marathon back to Athens to give word that the Greeks had been defeated there. In 480 BC, the Persians are going to launch a new invasion under Xerxes, who was the ruler at this point in time. It was Darius's son. And they launch a new invasion of Greeks. And the Greeks are very divided. Many stay neutral or side with the Persians themselves. But the Greek forces are going to have a battle at Thermopylae. Okay? In this, Xerxes is going to army will meet no resistance whatsoever, and they'll march all the way down the eastern coast. He comes to a narrow mountain pass and at a place called Thermopylae. 7,000 Greeks, 300 Spartans are there blocking his way. He assumes that he will easily push away the Greeks, but he underestimates their fighting ability. Again, with the phalanxes, they are able to hold off the Persians at this point in time for 3 days. And then finally, the Greeks will retreat, but they leave behind a rear guard. And that rear guard is made up of the 300 Spartans. And this is where we get the movie 300 from. It's the tale of Xerxes and the 300 Spartans. And what ends up happening is all 300 Spartans will be defeated, and defeated not easily, but they're all killed, but they leave a great impression on that group there. Eventually, they're able to hold off the Persians before all of them die. And the Athenians will then come back and defeat the Persians at sea near the island of Salamis. And the victory at Salamis and the plateau force the Persian retreat. And this becomes a huge part of where we see this. They're able to defend those cities there. The following year, several Greek states form an alliance. It's called the Delian League. And that alliance takes its name from Delos, which is an island in the Aegean Sea, which was its headquarters. League members are continued to press war against the Persians for several more years. They'll eventually drive the Persians from their territories surrounding Greece and end the threat of kind of future attacks there. This is that link to the Battle of Thermopylae. I don't think you guys are going to be able to press it, but if you type it in, you can see it. It's about a 6-minute video that talks about the Battle of Thermopylae. So consequences of the Persian War. It ends the threat. It ends the threat of the Persians there. And all the Greek city-states feel this new sense of confidence and freedom due to the victory that they have. Athens in particular is going to bask in that glory, and they become the leader of that Delian League. And for a time, they actually use it to their own advantage. So Athens controls the league by using force against their opponents. League members are essentially become provinces of the Athenian Empire. The headquarters will even be moved to Athens as well. And they will use military force against the members that challenge their authority. In time, those city-states became very little, more than provinces of the vast Athenian Empire. The stage will be set for a dazzling burst of creativity within Athens. Athens will grow to be a very powerful group. But what we will also see is it's also setting the stage for a battle that's going to take place between Athens and Sparta. And we will talk more about that within the next coming sections. So that is it for today, gentlemen. And make sure you check Google Classroom to see if there's any other things that are linked to this. So have a good day, guys, and we'll talk to you later.